destroys the economy. Like WoW's economy is dead. Like there's nothing to WoW's economy anymore. You just, if you have the money for it, if you work a 9 to 5, you come home, buy a WoW token, buy yourself a piece of gear, you're good. It's because we get so much catch up so frequently, the gear invalidates itself, so God just becomes this big thing that people splurge on, and it doesn't really matter anymore.
Welcome everybody to Casually Hardcore episode 20, now on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud. So if you don't like watching or seeing our faces, you can always check out our illustrious voices. And today we're so thrilled to bring to you guys ScottZone. Scott is a WoW refugee. We're going to be talking about Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft. We're going to be talking about streaming. He just went full time as a streamer and is crushing it. If you don't know ScottZone, you need to go check out his stream. It's both entertaining, educational, and this guy is pulling off stuff that it's like, yeah, let me go run this at like Neil Van Darnus at minimum eye level, and we're gonna get the clear, guys. And I see him tweeting out like, we didn't do it today, we're doing it tomorrow. So I have tip of the hat for, even though you're coming in years later, you're doing all the work. You're putting it all together. So Scott, say hi, introduce yourself to people who haven't heard of you. And let's talk about Final Fantasy, World of Warcraft, and video games.
So, my name's Scott. I'm a British dude over from the UK. I come from the mythical lands of Oxfordshire, which is quite a lovely place to be. And honestly, I moved over to Final Fantasy very, very recently. I decided to smash myself into some of the content. And when I found out that there was a minimum item level feature, as just mentioned, I mean, that pretty much became the content of my stream for the foreseeable future. So just smashing into minimum item level, enjoying the game as much as I can. It's so rare that I find an MMO that I connect with as much as I did my first one. And yeah, it's exciting to be here. I'm really, really excited to actually talk and not just, make fun of stuff and be a memer for the next hour. I can actually have a serious discussion, which would be cool.
Oh, this is excellent. So, Chris is the one who discovered you. So Chris is, I would think, he became the first fan. And he's like, Brian, you got to go check out this guy named Scott. He is doing some crazy stuff over here, and it's really interesting. So, Chris, what would you, how would you lead this? What questions would you have for Scott? What are your thoughts? I want to kind of turn it to you and let you, at least say hi.
I think what's interesting about Scott is you have such a wealth of information about World of Warcraft, and you think about things very logically, and so you take into this very well. So it's like listening to somebody talk about WoW that knows what they're talking about, but also experiencing your first time at so many things. So it's really exciting to think about, as the first topic we talk about here is we're coming up on a live letter. You know a ton about the game for somebody that's only been playing a little bit of time, but this is your first live letter. So I want to talk a little bit about the first live letter. Now, being a first live letter, this live letter is way longer than all the other ones in a 2-year cycle.
Not traditional right here.
It's a really intense one to make your first one. What are you expecting from a live letter?
Okay, so I've had drip feed information from everywhere. I've got the people in my Discord feeding me information, YouTube feeds me, and then I've made friends with Final Fantasy Momo. I don't know if you guys know him, but he's been feeding me information as well with just what's going on. So the live letter, from what I understand, is a very, very long live letter this time, and it should be giving us class information. I believe there's a video. Somebody showed me the Stormblood job video.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hoping to get another one of those so I can just make fun of all the abilities. That should be really cool. But what I actually want to see is I'm genuinely just looking for content, because I come from an area of the MMORPG community at the moment where content is so scarce. So I just want to see lots of variable pieces of content. I want to get more clarification on customization on Hrothgar, because I can't wait to be a big lion boy. That sounds really exciting. And then a few other things as well regarding predominantly the zones and the music. I've discovered I'm obsessed with Final Fantasy music now. I go back to the older games and listen to them just because of this game. So
it is so choice. The music in this game, it blows me away. It is not. I haven't found anything that I would say is comparable, to the point where Soken is the music director, and that guy like is a genius when it comes down to it, because it's like it doesn't matter if I've heard the track 100 times or 1,000 times. I'm just like, oh, this is great. And even when I go and listen to like, for me, like as an old 11 player, 11 was my first MMO, and coming from that environment, there are still this like the sounds of that instill this nostalgia and this sense of just like joy, or like, oh my gosh, like I remember that moment. And that's where it's like they spare no expense. And when so like when we were out in at FanFest, the soundtrack for the Shadowbringers trailer like just was so different and unique, yet at the same time I'm like, oh. Anyway, I cut you off because I just have to jump in on the concept of the sound design in this game. Go ahead, Scott.
I totally understand what you're saying, because there's specific memories I have that I'm not like, because in this game you have like the MSQ, right? You have the story elements, but there's specific moments when I think back to like World of Warcraft where getting lost in Teldrassil as like a 9-year-old kid who didn't understand how to level a Night Elf warrior properly, but then hearing like the song playing while I was going through the Barrow Dens and experiencing that, I'll never forget that. And that music, whenever I hear it, just like triggers this nice nostalgic euphoria. It's fantastic. So that's like I really understand about the music in this game, and I've already got some of those attachments now with like Forden when I did Forden EX.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
that's such a freaking amazing fight.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And same for Nidhogg as well. The Nidhogg fight was absolutely beautiful too. And yeah. I actually kind of like, I've been told off for it, but I kind of like the Bismarck song as well, because it reminds me of like old trance, like dance music, which is really, really nice to listen to.
Bismarck, like that for me, I'm glad you like it, because it's like I don't register with it. Like when he said it, I was like, I couldn't even hum the tune for Bismarck. I've got into it so many times that it was always like, oh god, it's Bismarck. And it's not like I felt like it was a difficult fight. It was just a mechanic heavy fight in which that, oh, somebody got knocked off. Oh, okay, we're gonna reset this. We were 2 seconds away from winning, but okay, everybody, it's just like, goodness gracious. I'll have to go back and listen to it, because it's like, when you talk with Thornton, I'm like, yeah, and then I'm like Bismarck, I'm like, man, it's been a while since I've actually done Bismarck, so maybe that's the problem. What's your favorite fight so far? Like I said, you're going in and doing Neil Van Darnus, you're doing all that. I think Neil is probably the hardest fight you've done so far, if I'm not mistaken, because it is still, even if you go and run it, not minimi level, but if you go run it unsynced, you have to pay attention to mechanics. You can lose it even running it as a level 70.
I believe so. If I go by, like, we have the wipe counter in our stream as well. So I always make a joke, because Ramu has so far took the most wipes,
okay.
even over Nail. So like I make fun of Nail and just say it's not as hard as Ramu. But Nail is probably the most difficult fight I've had to do so far, because it actually has mechanics in it that I believe some of those mechanics are like still used in Stormblood. I haven't done too much Stormblood Savage, but from what I've been told, some of those mechanics are still used in Stormblood. And the further I go into like FCOB as well, somebody's told me Bahamut's going to be crazy. No, I'm not allowed to have it spoiled for me, but people have also said when I eventually do T13 or T12? T12. They said T12 will probably end up becoming like one of my favorite fights as well, somebody else said. So I'm excited to see those. All in all, I would say Nail was the hardest fight for me to learn and figure out blind, but Ramu was the hardest fight for our group that we had at the time, because it requires so much coordination.
Absolutely.
That's what I would probably say on that.
Yeah, I think I'm very excited for you to jump into T12.
I don't think I cleared Ramu until the gear got better. I think I really struggled with that one. I just had to wait to outgear it. So to do it at minimum eye level, I don't think I've ever been in a group that's had the coordination. So, and that's not because I wasn't making my fair share of mistakes. That's just a tough fight.
Go ahead.
I'm so fortunate that my viewers, like, even though a lot of them like meme me all the time, and like mess around, have fun, they organize themselves. So like, even I'm doing it completely blind, but then one of them will pop a Discord link and Twitch chat. They'll all join it. They'll all start talking to each other and discussing stuff. And then if I try and like sneak some information in a party chat, like behind the webcam, they'll be like, no, you're not allowed any. So the fact that they're so coordinated makes stuff like Ramu easier, because it's just me who has to figure it out rather than them having to figure out all the coordination. So Ramu probably would have been harder if everyone was blind and there was no communication.
But speaking of everybody being blind, you're about to jump into a new expansion ready to go. Shadowbringers is going to be new for everybody. You're going to get that experience. So from that perspective, like, what's your gauge? Like, how excited are you for this expansion as a refugee? Because you came in, you got caught up, you're ready to go. What do you think?
Shadowbringers is thematic. Okay, so there's lots of
lots of ways to go.
Shadowbringers. Thematically, it's perfect for me because I like what if I analyze it with World of Warcraft. One of my favorite times in WoW was Arthas when he turns into a Death Knight, right? And then that whole like anti-villain, anti-hero theme. I come to the end of this trailer, and the guy, in order to win, turns into a Dark Knight and beats down an angel. Like, I'm sold. I'm already sold on that alone. But Shadowbringers looks, to me personally, more aesthetically pleasing, because I've never been like a huge fan of like the Asian-styled fantasy expansions, even though I thought it was pretty decent. It's never been like my personal like aesthetical taste.
Yeah,
I was more a fan of like the Gothic architecture of Ishgard. So going into Shadowbringers, maybe going back to a bit of those high fantasy roots would be really, really nice, and that's still the main appeal. And also as a person who, progged mythic content on tanking, the desire to switch to tanking again after seeing that Gunbreaker with the bandolier and all the armor, definitely excited about that. And just experiencing zones, going through the MSQ, and actually finally getting to do fights truly blind is the big one. Not having everybody else know what's going on.
It's fun. It is the only time that there's toxicity in the water. There's just blood in the water when people die a lot. So like, it's the only time I really see toxicity show up a lot in this community is day one, but it's a ton of fun. But it's just like you die twice because nobody's ever been there before, and people are like, oh, screw you, like, I'm getting out of here. And it's like, what are you gonna do? Like,
it's not. I hope that it's rare.
Since 10 a.m. I've run it 35 times. It's like, okay, well, I just got off work. Like, this is my first run. It's been out 6 hours. Like, let it.
The plus that I see with it when people go and say that it's like there is that kickback saying, guys, like, it's the first day, like, give it some time. Like, if as a community we could establish that, like, okay, guys, like, with the first week, like, you cannot complain if you wipe constantly, and we've all agreed, and that is the established rule. And if you haven't got a chance to do it by a week, there will be first time guides out. There'll be information that you can kind of go prep yourself so you're not going in blind, and that ends up setting the expectation. I don't know. It is so fun to be current when it is current, because it's like, I don't know, like, everybody, we just ready to throw stuff at this thing? Great, let's see what happens. And that's where also the devs get to then surprise us with even new mechanics. It's always like, once you see the mechanics over and over again, it's like, okay, we do this when we see this, we do this when we see this. But whenever they introduce something new, it's like, what does this mean? Oh my god.
Oh, sorry. I don't think too many people have thought about this end of it, but coming from World of Warcraft, this is really exciting for me because I don't already know the fights before the games come out, because I've had beta for the last few expansions. So by the time the game rolls around, I've done pretty much all of the fights on normal, heroic, and then obviously mythic is locked for us usually. So this is probably truly the last time in maybe 5 years or 6 years that I'll go into an expansion not already knowing the like dungeon fights coming up ahead, the mechanics I need to do. Obviously there's always last minute tweaks, but I think that's like a really, really big deal for me at this point. That's the main excitement, because I've not been able to go that blind for a long time. I like the fact that they don't give out beta to lots of people, so that everybody can figure it out before it comes out. That's really, really appealing to me.
So as a WoW player then, because it's like WoW, you have the public Telstra realm, you have that kind of concept. Players of 14 have in this case wanted something like that for a long time, to beta out these kind of changes. Right now, Chris and I were, as we all, Chris and I, like Chris, I, and you, we're all getting ready for Shadowbringers, but there isn't a kind of pre-launch patch that allows us to play around with the battle system changes to make sure that, like, hey, by the time it launches, everything's good to go. So, but I'm hearing you say that you actually kind of prefer that in some, obviously maybe bits and pieces. What do you like? Is it just the fact that you get to experience it with everybody gets to experience it at the same time, that's the strength of the system?
I think it's really like individual parts. So when it comes to dungeons, in this game, so you have your trials and such. I think being able to go into that like predominantly blind, not expecting anything, is usually the most fun. But when it comes to class changes, it can be a 50-50 pendulum a lot of the time, because you really don't know if they're making major changes. I'll reference BFA again just because it's really easy to do.
Yes.
Making major changes to like specific classes. Generally, you want, you know, people who have a very good idea of how each class plays, testing those out as well as the developers, and then also having some people at more like a skill floor testing those as well to make sure that they're able to grasp it and move forward. Whereas there's also the same situation where you can have a beta where everybody gets access to everything. You provide feedback 6 months in advance, and then the developers choose to just not take any of it. That's one of the scenarios we just ran into. So I think if I could take bits and pieces, it would be allow people to test combat changes, allow people to make sure that the vessel they're experiencing the content through is good. That way, if the content is maybe slightly overtuned, people won't be as frustrated because the vessel that they're using isn't bad or broken in any way. So all it takes is maybe like a quick hot fix from the developers to sort of nerf it down a little bit, or bump it a bit too easy. That's predominantly like how I would see, because a similar situation happened back in Ulduar, where a long time ago, one of WoW players' favorite raids ever, for the most part.
One of the best raids they'll ever do. I couldn't see them beating it.
So unfortunately for me, that was one of the worst times for me to be raiding, because in the way the classes worked at that point was one Death Knight in your raid was basically the support Death Knight, and everyone else was like blood spec, armor penetration gems going in, big damage. I was the support Death Knight, right? And that meant when I experienced Ulduar, even though the content was incredible, I had a miserable time because I wasn't having fun playing my particular spec or my role in the raid. So that led me to have a slight distaste towards Ulduar, even though I recognize it as like mechanically fantastic. And I can see that happening in like Final Fantasy as well. If somebody's class really, really sucks, they experience like a trial, and the trial was great, but they don't like it because when they first did it, their class wasn't great. So I always think like the vessel is the most important thing, and then the content is outshines that once the vessel's been created well. Generally, that's how I sort of think about that.
So coming over from 14 with such a WoW experience, like what in your initial serving are you missing? Is there anything that you just wish there was still more of from a WoW experience?
I don't know how people feel about this, but the raids are like, I really enjoy the fights in them so far, and they've been super fun. But I wish they weren't segmented, if that makes sense. Like, I'd like to experience it in like a one long run. Like, you sit down with everybody, you do one long run, no swapping out the instance back into the instance. You know, a little bit of trash in between. I genuinely really enjoy that. So I would like to see like raids with a little bit more trash. I know that's probably 50-50 on a lot of people.
I'm with you 100%. Just FYI, I'm just letting you know. Like yes, absolutely. I thought like Binding Coil, and I thought Alexander had a little bit mix of that. I loved Omega for the fights, but it just felt like it was trials. Like, and so it's like, what's up? Sorry.
I really didn't like the instance level checker. It didn't feel like a raid to me because I was doing it solo. Then I was going, okay, lads, come on, let's go kill it. And then you leave, and then you do everything solo. And then you're bringing like your 7 mercenaries again. Like, it would have felt better if everyone was doing it together, right?
I 100% agree. But I cut you off. Go ahead.
Sorry. But predominantly, I'd like to see more usage of the dungeon content as well. Because right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I've seen it so far is like, it could be because I'm coming in at the end of an expansion, but once you've done the dungeons, and then you go do like the hard versions where they change it up a little bit, you're predominantly refarming those dungeons, not for gear, but for currency to then go and buy gear, right?
Correct.
In a typical expansion, yes. Last time, Eureka was one of the predominant ways to get those tomes, but your secondary option is to grind the same dungeons over and over as you become more and more overgeared.
Yeah, there is a lot within Stormblood that actually diversified that, because like Heaven's Word and then even in ARR, like there was the one path, then there were like 2 paths, then there were 3 paths, and even PvP as a method of farming up the currency. So there is variety, which is important. But yeah, go ahead. You had a thought, or that you were going to finish.
So the one thing I would really, really like to see is actually an implementation from WoW, which they got rid of, which people outcried against. I would love to see them do challenge modes, which is basically you have like the dungeons, and then there's like a timer that runs, and then you can get a golden, a silver, or a bronze. And if you get golden in every single dungeon, you will get one cosmetic weapon to basically say, hey, we did this, and it looks really cool. And then for like the silver ones, maybe you get like an armor piece, and then for the bronze one, maybe get a pet. But just creating some like reason to go back and sort of push yourself and try speedrun those dungeons. Not a Mythic Plus, not refarmable, but just once. Just finish them all once as fast as possible, and then you get like a cosmetic reward to sort of like show you that you've done that. I would see that because they got rid of that for Mythic Plus. And personally, I much prefer challenge mode. I know a lot of people prefer challenge mode as well.
Yeah, challenge mode is incredible. So Brian, like it's literally just a race. Like
Explain
so
to me like F5.
Because so to kind of translate for everybody, M plus is a lot more like a deep dungeon affix, where you're basically taking a modifier and applying it to a level. And so imagine if you went and ran Aram Veil, but now like everything explodes. So now you're looking for fruit and everything explodes. And then the higher you go, the harder everything is in its own stats. But then you're adding more and more affixes, just like as you work higher and higher up a deep dungeon tower, but now with dungeons. A challenge mode is much more of like a speed run, like get it done quickly, and then it basically the whole purpose of doing it. M plus actually rewards you with gear and all this, so it's a form of progression. Challenge mode was literally just, can I get glamour? Can I get transmog? I got shaman shoulders that have volcanoes on them, like literally volcanoes that explode. And the only way to get those shoulders was to clear challenge modes. So it was straight up bragging rights, nothing more.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm not gonna lie, like that sounds in freaking credible, because for the longest time, especially right now, like when we go into Shadowbringers, we're gonna have probably especially in just a couple months, somewhere I'm gonna guess around 90-ish dungeons when you look at all the expansions and all the content. And I love it when I get to go and run one of the old pieces of content, and I just like, man, I would love to see them just level it up. I don't need them to redesign the zone. I don't need them to redesign the fights, but what I want them to do, I want them to take Heaven on High, deep dungeon content, smush it together, and then it just becomes its own thing that you can do. And I love the concept for glamour because people are going, like, if you make it a part of progression, it's going to just add stress. It's going to make people feel like they have to do it. But from a glamour perspective, it gives you the incentive that said, like, because you said you're running it at minimum eye level. Like, we could go do that. There's really no incentive to do that, and so it ends up becoming lower on the priority list. From your perspective, I love that that's actually something important to you. And it also, I think, gives you a lot of credibility when it comes down to it. Like, I did it when it was hard. Because when you run the content at minimum eye level, it is challenging. But then obviously people overgear it. And then once you know mechanics is just about that muscle memory execution, and ideally to perfection, especially in the raids. But my gosh, like that sounds amazing. Anything that gets me to go back into that content. And at the same time, I love the idea of kind of that timer. I've wanted some kind of time trial. Just like, can the four of us beat our previous time? Like, I love stats. I'm a baseball nerd. And any little thing. But, dude, okay. We'll send you to Japan. You've earned a ticket.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any of you guys watched Day 9 a lot back in the day when he would do his Fun Day Mondays. Like, I want a Fun Day Monday achievement system so bad. Like, just straight up, this week, for this piece of glamour, it's a piece of glamour that was previously released, but it'll be in this unique dye color, never to be released again. If you can go run X dungeon running backwards, or like running with pants, or or like just something ridiculous. And that's what I think the challenge mode offered. Is it locked you in at an eye level and just said, can you do it? Like, go.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it didn't change the way you played it, and I would love to take it like one step further and start encouraging you to do weird stuff, which a lot of the achievements in WoW do. A lot of the achievements are like, clear this fight on heroic without killing any of the ads, or without like.
Yeah.
I think that's really neat.
But the fact that it's cosmetic rewards is like the bit that I want to emphasize on that.
Oh yeah, it's important.
Yeah, when you start adding like extra modifiers and difficulties for like actual gear progression, you start splitting communities really quickly.
So to go the other direction, now you've been over here. Debatably, because you're clearing things on minimum eye level, you have more endgame experience than probably most other content creators, even though you're later to the game. What would you take back with you? So you go back to WoW today. They've said, you know what, Scott, we're going to listen to all your feedback, and we're going to make 9.0 for you. It's going to be perfect. What do you say? Okay, you've got to learn from what they're doing over here in 14.
I would take the class designers with me. Honestly, I would. Okay, this is a really big one. whoever sits down at Square Enix and says, okay, here's the dungeon content, here's the raid content, and then here's every single other piece of thing that's just wacky and crazy that people can do during the day, like the Golden Saucer, even if people don't like it, like the Blue Mage stuff, like the side content single player stuff, all of those, I would take pretty much all of those things, and I would just shove it into WoW. Because the biggest issue in World of Warcraft is, unless you're a Mythic Plus runner, a pet collector, a raider, or somebody that tries to make money, there's really nothing else there. Like, unless you do one of those 4 repeatable piece of content farms, there's nothing really else for you to do out in the world or go out and do anything whatsoever.
Yeah.
Even the fate system I would take with me. Like, we have world quests, but they're awful. But at least with the fate system, you could set like a sync requirement. You could set the sync requirement even lower than what you would initially need to force the fact that you need more people there. And then it would create one of those environments where you start actively finding people, grouping up, going around and killing stuff. And if you're getting a currency for that, which is another big one I would take with me, actually having currencies back, that would be a huge thing as well. There's so many factors, and I've said this before on stream. Final Fantasy XIV feels like a weird, like, offspring version of mid Wrath of the Lich King / end of Burning Crusade. The way it does its like currency, the way it's starting to build on its class design in a similar way. It really, really does feel like that. And I remember being back then and going, I love the fact that I can farm something out, but I also can set a specific time and go, okay, by this point, I will be able to buy that item. That's a really nice feeling to be done rather than relying on RNG. So I would take all of those pieces of content with me. And then, I'm not going to lie, even though I do enjoy the raids here, they're unique and different, I would probably leave them here because I like that continuous environment. So, to summarize that real quick, all my content stuff, the fates, and absolutely I would take the currency systems that you guys have.
So what was your favorite time in WoW? Like, to kind of get a feel for like what perspective you're kind of judging these games against each other, because we have a lot of experience. I mean, we have 8 versus 3 expansions. Like, there's a lot of WoW content out there.
Multiple ones. Burning Crusade would probably be like the all-time favorite for me. Then I didn't like Wrath of the Lich King that much, but I recognize how good it was for a lot of people. And then the second point would probably be Mr. Pandaria. Was the last point in the game where I was like, I kind of like the game in a loving way. After Mr. Pandaria, all of those expansions I wasn't a big fan of. Even Legion, I wasn't a big fan of. So Mr. Pandaria and the Burning Crusade are the 2 areas I'm judging this off, I would say.
Okay. So what is stopping people from coming over from 14? Like, from WoW? What stops the jump? What is that bridge that keeps people from going one direction or the other? Because if WoW is ever good and 14 ever gets stale, like, that bridge is going to go the other direction. What keeps that from being connected?
I've asked so many WoW friends this since I've started streaming Final Fantasy and doing Final Fantasy. The main one, a lot of people don't want to admit this, but the main one was actually the races for a lot of my friends. They just don't like any of the races in Final Fantasy XIV, and people have such a personal attachment to their characters that occasionally, especially for like MMO players, coming over to a game and then like not really having a race you connect with or really like the look of, like the orcs or the Tauren or the trolls, kind of sucks. And it kind of makes you, puts you off the game, even though the mechanics are good. And it seems like a really inferior thing, but it's quite a big deal for a lot of people. And not really for me, but for other people, it's a huge deal. So that's one thing I would say. And then also the other one is, it's so hard to get around it, but the GCD is the one that always comes up all the time with my friends.
Is that something where like they put enough time? Because the GCD does get faster as you level. It does get faster. I mean, it's not like dramatically faster, but I'm just curious. Is it like, are you comparing it from level 1? I mean, obviously it's like, hey, I know you don't like this this fact, level up to 70 and it's totally different.
So the way they compared it was they were comparing it from level 1 to level 1, and then from level 70 to obviously level 120 to level 70.
Mm-hmm.
And when you compare it from level 1 to level 1, yes, there is it's noticeably slower.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to say that because it is. But then when you compare a max level to a max level with like Battle for Azeroth the way it is right now, the CPM, the clicks, the CPM in Final Fantasy is higher for the most part than pretty much all BFA classes, but it's a psychological thing because when you're locked out of pressing a button, even if the CPM is higher, it doesn't feel good because players don't like to lose control. So in World of Warcraft, when you've had about 14 years of having, perfect control, no lag on abilities, instant casts are instant casts, there's no animation lock, losing that control feels really bad. So I would say that's that's predominantly one of the things they said, because some of them have high level characters. They did boosts. They didn't want to sit through MSQ. They did boosts, and they did one of them rode a dragoon. And as you know, jump has not a long one, but a pretty decent animation lock on it. And every time he would jump, he would just say I'm not looking forward to pressing jump. I'm like, why? It's because I just lose control. It feels like I'm being mini stunned in WoW. And I do understand that perspective, especially if you've played the game for that many years, trying to make that switch, that psychological switch of being out of control. It can feel really, really weird and jarring.
I got a question about you about MSQ, because we kind of before the show we were talking and you were talking. I'm not going to name his name, but you can if you want. It's not like a secret, but it's talking about the concept of MSQ being this kind of roadblock, and you can jump past it, but whenever anybody, it's coming, Chris made 2 videos why you should play and why you shouldn't play 14, and MSQ was on both lists. If you like story, you're gonna love 14. If you don't like story, I have bad news. And for some, that is a major roadblock that I see, because I look at it right now and say, imagine if I was like, hey Scott, you got to come play 14 with me. I've been playing for 9 years. Welcome to year 1. Okay, so you either need to spend additional money, or you're 3 seasons behind this really awesome show that I hope you resonate with, because for me it's motivating. For me, the next chapter of the story, I'm like, I want to know what's happening. But some people, can I kill it? So how big is that? From coming from WoW, are you somebody who resonates with story? And then when you talk to people who still haven't made the jump, what would you tell them? How could you sell that beyond just you have to jump or you have to suffer?
It's hard. It's a hard sell. It's a really hard sell. For me personally, it wasn't too bad because I come from a CRPG background. So low, lots of text, I'm totally fine with. So I could easily grind through it. One of my friends came through. I basically sold it to him as the gameplay is fantastic because you get towards the end and you can literally skip all the text. I taught him how to skip, and he just skipped the entire MSQ, didn't worry about any of it, and then watched videos to catch up, summarization videos. And that was always he managed to get caught up, and then he only read the bits that they were specifically interested in. I feel like that's probably the easiest way to sell it, because WoW doesn't have anything like locking you behind quests in that fashion. If you want to start the new expansion, they deliberately do it so that the getting to that expansion is very easy. But then the issue you run into is you're locked on that expansion's content and you lose out on all the other content. So it's a 2-part issue there.
Would you want to see Final Fantasy introduce some kind of previously on Final Fantasy kind of baked into the game, some way in which that it's they can say hey, we're going to summarize this for you in game, so you don't need to go people will summarize it, we'll summarize it. People are Square Enix would take away that job. I'm great, it takes a lot of work to summarize these stories. What would you say? Would that be something that would help, that people could kind of skip, and then it's okay, what do you need to know? That's where I see seasonal content in TVs do it really well. They kind of cue you into things that it's been a couple years, you don't remember this character, let's talk about it.
I honestly believe that would be totally fine. Just make it an option. Don't change anything. Don't remove quests from the MSQ. Don't make it so they don't have to do it. Just give the option, and then if somebody wants to, they can. If somebody doesn't want to, then they can experience it themselves, and then at any point they want, they can just press that button and move forward with the MSQ. Because I think I've noticed, I've looked at a lot of community debates surrounding this, so we've had this debate on our stream, right?
Yeah.
About MSQ stuff. One of the really nice suggestions I saw was siphon off stuff the quest where you have to sniff a chocobo in A Realm Reborn. Make that an optional quest. Don't make it part of the MSQ, make that an optional quest. Or, like I said, what you could do is you could have that seasonal requirement and make it an option. But the main thing, and this is probably not going to sound cool, is I genuinely believe that as far as the MSQ is concerned, consolidate it a little bit more in future. Like, recognize that you're going to have another expansion later on, maybe another one after that. So consolidate it a little bit more, make it less quests. You can still have the same amount of text, right? But psychologically, just make it less quests. And I think that would actually help out, because when people go from A Realm Reborn to Heavensward, right? A lot of the optional stuff, a lot of the like flavor stuff or the fluff, it's just one quest. But you read through all the paragraphs that you've done, or you can skip through it. Instead of skipping quest, then doing this one, skipping that, doing that one, skipping that. It's psychologically, it just feels better. And I think that's probably like one of the best ways to go about it.
Yeah, like the number of quests from ARR to Heavensward was just absurd. When you go look at Stormblood, it's a nice compact 40. So from Stormblood, you know, the past the story part, but from Stormblood to Shadowbringers, it's 40 quests, and it felt right. And and it's like having experienced. I thought they nailed it with Heavensward, and I thought Stormblood really kind of refined it. When it comes down to it. Now, I'm not going to talk about story spoilers here, but I think Heavensward, I'm with you. Like I thought the ending of it was better. I thought the tone of it, the theme. That's why like people are like, it's Shadowbringers and Stormblood is SB blah blah blah. I'm like, it's SB1 and SB2. Like Stormblood feels like it's just leading right into like as a whole. That's just my conclusion there. So I got a question though. So what do you expect as a WoW player, as a new 14 player, somebody who's caught up? What are you expecting content-wise for Shadowbringers when it launches? Like, what, especially as a streamer now, as full time, like, have you thought of what your strategy is? What because you're going to be doing story. You know, what are your thoughts?
So I've been asked this before. Like people don't realize this. Like, I get suggestions, Scott, you should do this, you should do this. I've already got like a 6-month content plan in my brain. After looking through the content list. So I know in the next 6 months, I know exactly what I'm doing. And that includes like when Shadowbringers comes out, I know the first content drought, I'm going to go back and do Alexander minimum item level savage, right? I know that's going to happen. But it's as far as what I'm looking forward to, the MSQ is going to be the big one, because the MSQ, for me personally, I can relax. I don't have to worry. I just read some text, talk to the chat, have a great time. And if the story's good, I can throw out some really wild speculative theories, and we can all just have fun with it, right?
Chris.
So I don't read all the story because I get impatient, which means that like I only have what was force fed to me, like areas that like my brain read the text before my finger hit the escape key, and so like I'm just super out of context all the time. And then every once in a while I'll pick one patch and I'm like, I'm gonna care, and so I'll have like this whole patch like totally ingrained, but there's no context. And so I end up with these wild theories of like how things connect. And there's varying degrees of appreciation within the community of like, that's totally wrong. That's impossible. That doesn't make any sense because of this and this. And it's like, yeah, but I didn't read any of those scenes. Like, it makes sense to me. And so like, I know that the one that Brian's thinking of is I assume you're talking about the Prince. So I have actually, as like a contract person, so my degree's in architecture, which means I spend a lot of time in software developing assets and stuff. And so naturally, like I'm really good in the Adobe suite. And so I have made side gigs out of making sprite sheets for people, making their own games and things like that. So I appreciate what they do with sprites. I understand how it works at a technical level, but sometimes the implementation is just a little too obvious for me. And so on the Namatsu, there is a Namatsu with a face scar that's like a little star right here. Right. And Prince, whatever his name is, also has a face scar right here. The same one, okay? I think he might be a Namatsu. Now, if you go back and play through the story with that in mind, he says things like, I've got to go for a dip to refresh myself, like, between these cutscenes. Like, I've got to go be refreshed or whatever. I was like, well, of course you do. You're a fish. And then you go into like the Ruby Sea and these pirates are like, yeah, we saw Prince, whatever his name, swimming here earlier. And it's like, that makes sense. And so like, and it just kept coming up. And then like people are like, no, he's not a fish. And I was like, but he could be.
I mean, like people keep criticizing me about believing that Yoshi P created an entire trailer to attract rail refugees. But honestly, I believe you're onto something there. It's crazy enough to be true.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So back to controversial topic.
Yeah.
Right.
Jump potions and WoW tokens are like the two things that like WoW's had for a long time. They've existed in other games. People always say like, oh, WoW, the WoW token, no, like EVE Online had it forever, and I think there's plenty of other games that have it. Same with jump potions. Jump potions is more of an eventuality. Like, games don't have it on launch because it's not necessary. But once you're 12 expansions deep, like, you've got to give people a way to catch up, and you either have to go remake old content, which nobody's paying you to do, or you have to just give them the ability to jump it, which is a whole lot cheaper to develop. So with jump potions, like, one of the big criticisms of jump potions in 14 when they were added and still today is that now you're going to have all these people at level cap that don't know how to play their job.
Oh yeah, we've had this argument. Yeah.
So I assume that was, I don't remember in WoW, like, when jump potions were being added, I don't remember it being the same level of outrage, but maybe I'm just kind of storing that in my brain. Like,
no, such a contrast. It was Warlords of Draenor when the 100 boost came in. Because you have the trader with a gnome in it who, like, boosts up into his warrior armor, and all of us were like, "Oh God, no! Is this a jump boost?" It made sense in WoW. As much as we hated it, it made sense in WoW because it's 100 levels, right? So it sort of made sense at that point. But at the same time, it does mean. So here's what happened. I'll quickly run it down for you. Really fast. Okay, here we go. This is a bit of WoW history. So when the jump boost came in Warlords of Draenor, one of the things that a lot of us didn't realize was that there were people who were jump boosting, getting to 100, gearing up for normal modes, and then they were forever stuck at normal mode and couldn't get past heroic difficulty. And there's normal, heroic, and mythic. The heroic difficulty, by the way, is absurdly easy. It's not hard. A normal mode is basically LFR for dungeon content. So what ended up happening was, until Preach Gaming made a video about this, none of us realized, but he went in, started tanking low-level, pretty much pre-heroic stuff, and all of these players were running around using abilities they shouldn't be doing, AoEing on single target, polymorphing stuff when they're half HP, bringing them back to full HP so that you have to re-kill the mob again. All of this was happening all over the place, and when he was asking them what was going on, essentially what was happening is all these players had boosted their characters, and then, because they had the gear, just dive straight into dungeons, because that's what they were told to do. That's what, like, the game told you to do. So Blizzard ended up remedying that situation by creating, like, an introductory instance scenario that you jump boost, you go into, and then it teaches you the basics of each ability, and then you get thrown out into the open world, and it's a couple of quests, and then into a dungeon, right? Now, if you do a jump boost in a game like Final Fantasy, I cannot even begin to imagine what a new player would do with those abilities, with the animation locks, with everything going on. Because the classes in this game are noticeably more complex than WoW is now. I really can't imagine what a jump boost would be like in this game. I would say that I'm slightly for it, as long as it's not to the current level of the expansion.
Yes.
Okay.
That's always how it ends up working.
That's what I would be okay for, because there's a lot of MSQ in this game, and I know some players don't want to do that.
Which is not in WoW, right? It gets you to 100 or 110, and then you go through the scenario that's basically like a class quest meets Hall of the Novice. It's not even like an hour. Like, it's quick. It's 30 minutes maybe. If you're reading and you've never done it before, like, if you're boosting a character and you played that, it's maybe a half hour, and then you're out in the world, go nuts. And they give it away with every expansion now. You get one with every expansion now. So from here on out,
in WoW, we don't give that away. We're making that.
You now, they not only put it out there, but they're like, no, like, and the first one's free. Like, it's on us. First hit's on us, and future hits you can buy with WoW Gold, so you can either trade your time or your money for. So on that same note, do you think that jump potions made the game better in current content, or would the game be better if it had never introduced them?
Well, it depends. It really depends, like, from the perspective of what the player wants to achieve in the game, right? If you're the type of player who only really cares about, like, doing harder content, it really doesn't affect you for the most part, because you'll probably never run into those players for the next couple of months until they figure the game out, start getting the gear, start gearing up, learning their class, and getting into that content. So you actually don't run into them very often. The only time you run into them is at the start of an expansion, or if you yourself are playing at, like, a more relaxed level. So I would say, for the most part, that if they introduce some form of, like, Hall of a Novice scenario where for each individual class they sort of explain the basics, it will probably end up like WoW did, where you don't really run into that issue very often. In World of Warcraft, when they added that instance scenario, we sort of stopped seeing the issues that we had originally seen at the low-level content, where people were getting hard stuck past on normal, basically. We didn't run into that anymore because suddenly everyone had a basic idea of how to play the game, and all you really need is a basic idea for most content. So as long as it's something similar to that, it'll be okay. If they don't do that, I'm
Yeah.
up in the air.
I always describe that the jump potion isn't an issue with the mechanic. It's an issue with the individual, and it's always going to be vary based on that, because there's plenty of people that I've played with that have never paid it for a jump potion whatsoever and are the worst players because they have absolutely no interest in group content and learning whatever. They're like, you don't pay my sub is obviously the typical kind of response. Like, hey, like, and that's where, like, you know, how that conversation goes in an instance can always vary. You never really know, like, how receptive the person is to, like, you know, maybe stop running around, taking the boss around in circles. Can we stand? You know, we don't need to keep moving. You're good. I don't want him hitting me. It's like, it doesn't work that way. He will hit you regardless. It's a statistical dice roll. What's up?
I was gonna say you can always tell when a tank is jump boosted because the moment you pull them up, the moment they pull something, they stand where they are and they never turn it around away from the party. Yeah. And immediately, you know, okay, that's a fresh tank. Right?
It's like brand new tank. But I always see that if somebody who does jump goes and, you know, looks at, because they have the Hall of the Novice, they go look and read their tooltips and they go practice on a dummy and then maybe go watch a video, they're going to do just fine. The game isn't going to sit here and punish them. You know, it's like, yeah, especially on normal content. Now, Savage is different. You really want to practice and kind of really make sure you fully understand it. I think, though, the jump potion and what I would say where it irks me as a longtime player of this game is that I see it as a kind of a tax on those who've been late. Because if I, like, say my brother decided to come back and play this game, he got up to level 20 and then, you know, it just wasn't for him. And that's fine. Like, not every game's for everybody. But let's say he wanted to come back and say, hey, I want to play. I have everybody at 70. I have nothing. I would have to start a new character, level up to 20, so that we can do content together. We could do fates, we could do dungeons, but there's also really no major incentive. Like, there's no progression for me. So there's no real, like, if I was able to level sync down, if I, like, in his single player fights, if we could go run those together, that it ends up becoming a, like, well, yeah, like, maybe I'm not getting too much out of it, but we're still having the experience of playing together, rather than you either need to pay or you need to play solo. And that's where I'm like, we need a third pillar. We need that third pillar to kind of round it out. But I feel like the money's too sweet. The honeypot, you know, it's like, oh.
I didn't recognize that you guys don't get a free one.
We don't. Not yet. Who knows? They could change that with the Shadowbringers.
Which by the time we get to, I mean, right now it doesn't really, it's not totally required, but as we start to talk about 5.0, 6.0, 7.0, like, I don't know where the line is, but before we get to 10.0, it's required. So if it's not required today, somewhere in there, there's a line, and it's just a question of where Square Enix thinks that line is.
How long has Final Fantasy 5 years, right?
2013 was 2.0, and then 2015, 2017. But before 2013 , yeah, so 2013, that's right.
I've been playing since 2010, so don't give me this 5 years BS.
So 2010 was 1.0.
Yeah.
And that lasted to 2013. But 1.0 is kind of, I mean, it's like the prequel to the game. Like, so many people only came in at 2.0 and beyond, and really the things that are left over from 1.0, there are legacy servers, there are legacy characters where they got to keep their character, but like Brian's. But a lot of things have changed. Like, it was a total overhaul to the game. Think about if Cataclysm had removed Outland, had removed, like, literally just all, back to Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms, and that was it. It is a total from scratch rebuild of the game.
The reason I quickly asked was because if I put it in, like, the time frame of, like, WoW for me, if it's been around like that many years, then you're sort of looking at, like, the end of Wrath of the Lich King going into Cataclysm now, when we got the first jump potion in Warlord. So you're looking at maybe 2 more expansions before, if it follows a similar trend, 2 more expansions before the conversation will probably reach its peak, and you might see, like, an implementation of a free pot or something.
And I think a lot of the pain point here comes with the MSQ, is so they were able to go back and fix a lot. They were able to kind of put that conversation off by introducing heirloom items and all these things to say, we'll just speed it up. Like, we'll just give you ways that people can buy heirloom items for friends, and that we can increase experience gains from this. And then, like, the recruit a friend, like, ridiculous experience. But people ask, a lot of new players come into this from WoW and they say, what's the fastest way to level? And I was like, MSQ. And they're like, well, people are saying Palace of the Dead's faster experience. Yes, but you have to do MSQ either way. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if something's faster, you have to do it.
And the other unknown is New Game Plus, and chat's actually bringing that up. And that's the reason why I don't know about New Game Plus is because they actually haven't told us really about it. Like, they've said it's, for me, it makes me think Chrono Trigger, and, it's like, what does this really mean? And they've kind of said, like, it's a way to replay it, and that could be a good thing, maybe. I don't know. Like, that's one of the things that is that unknown that I hope blows me away. I hope that all of a sudden everybody's like, this is the best implementation of how this is handled, but I still don't know enough about the New Game Plus system to sit here and say that, yes, this is what we need. That's that third pillar. I hope it is. I'm rooting for it by every fiber of my being.
It sounds like level sync, going back through the story. Maybe one of the phrases they said sounded like you got to take your current abilities, which would mean you'd be going back through in like an overpowered mode, and you're going to play through the story. They kind of made it sound like you'd be able to select by chapter, but not necessarily by quest, where you hop in, and that you'd be able to hop in like with friends. So for any of the parts that you're out in the world killing things, the solo fights would still be solo, but you'd be able to kind of play along with a friend. And that's really all we know ish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we have to wait and see. Like, once we might be able to go hands-on with it here next week. So we'll have to, when we can talk about it, we don't know. So we'll find out.
No information, right? So it's unexpected.
Maybe the live letter, maybe the 3.5 hour live letter, they'll show it off.
So to finish that conversation up, the other thing that I see this in WoW also, the most recent iteration of it was at the end of Legion when they made Mage Tower easier. And so, yeah, see, that's the noise here. So, hey, I appreciate it. My bear looks amazing. So that Guardian Druid fight had me beat, and then they nerfed it, and it was like, all right, I can do this. So when content is made more bearable, easier, or a jump potion is added, or anything that allows a new player to achieve something that you put in more work for, there is a constant like, well, that's not fair. They got to do it for less.
Right.
How do you think Final Fantasy handles that versus WoW? Because WoW is pretty, I mean, as much as WoW will nerf things, WoW is also not afraid to just take things out of game. Like, there are so many unobtainable items and mounts, and like, well, you didn't go to BlizzCon. Well, I tried to buy a ticket. It was sold out. Yeah, I wasn't asking. Like, you didn't go. Mount's locked. What do you want me to do?
So for the most part, like, we've had a lot of like stuff that's been brought back into the game as of recent. And one of the things that a lot of people do like is the fact that if something exists and then you beat it on its hardest difficulty and it provides you a cosmetic reward, and then they're like, okay, now it's accessible to everybody. I think what the community generally does agree that for the most part, if you made the cosmetic not available and just gave it to the people that did it when it was supposed to be done, that would add more value on it, it adds more desire to it, and then the next time that system rolls around, you'll probably see people try harder at trying to obtain that because they know it's not going to just be there. You can reference this to the patch on patch, the way like gearing works right now, with lots of people will clear the content in the game, and then they'll just go, I'll just wait because the catch-up system's coming in a month, so there's no reason for me to try, because I know in a month I'm just going to get the same item level, and then that next month I'll just do the exact same thing. And everybody started like half-assing it for the most part, and raids aren't like, people don't really like raiding as much now. Like the raid community has died off because of this, because of that style of like implementation. And as long as, I don't know how Final Fantasy does it exactly. I don't know if they do a similar thing.
The
like
raid,
that.
the Eureka or the relic always gets easier, and I always go, I'll wait, and then I'm like, okay, and then by the time it gets down to the end of it, I'm like, all I'm doing is doing this for glamour. Maybe I'll start with the next one, and then it's like, and then it's the same process. So
I don't have it ahead of the curve, if that's what you're asking. They don't have ahead of the curve, so there is no ahead of the curve. There is no Glory of the Raider, like get a unique mount for the expand. Like
that's really important for making content desirable.
Okay, so on that note, moving into cheapening things, the WoW token.
Oh yeah,
like Brian and I are huge proponents of the WoW token.
I have freaking Krista.
Made better for it.
I have Krista on my account that there's nothing I can use for it, and it would be great to be able to earn that with the I could, like, it'd be great if that became that premium currency, whether it's a token or not, to be able to shop on the Mog Station, to be able to, like, okay, because essentially the challenge I see is that like people are like, oh, you only have 5 million gil. It's like I got up to 70, and I've given away like well over 60, 70 million gil, probably more in my time with the game. I don't have a use for it. But oh, you can get a big house. Like, okay. Like those aren't necessarily motivators. But if all of a sudden it was like, wait, gil has this other intrinsic value, whether I can pay for my sub or I could buy that die, or there's this other Square Enix ecosystem and market. Like, I actually really appreciate what I've seen over in WoW. Now, when we've talked about that, like the fact that people bought Destiny 2 and Call of Duty and Diablo just by like, oh, I had all this gold sitting around. There's a market for it. Like the last thing I really want Scott's opinion, but I'm on this / monologue here, is that people are buying the gil anyway. They're doing it and breaking terms of service. Yes, we can ban them. Can't. Okay, good luck finding them. How much money does that actually cost? Isn't it just easier? And that's the belief that I'm coming from. Am I right? Am I wrong? Where am I falling short? Because that's my thought.
So in World of Warcraft, like it was originally, obviously, like it has lots of really good benefits to it. It was originally implemented to battle gold sellers for the most part, but it didn't work. It just didn't work because there's absolutely no way you're going to stop them.
No, as long as there's money to be made.
Yeah, exactly.
You tax drugs in the real world high enough, people will still go to the black market. It's okay.
Exactly. So like the way a lot of people see WoW token now is people just see WoW token as a really, really nice way for gold sellers who do have too much money to be able to just like go, okay, I want to invest this in some actual stuff to make sure that they still feel like they're earning and spending time in game. If you're implementing it for like the reason that you just suggested, so that you could buy cosmetics on the store, I think that's totally fine. Give people the option to be able to earn the cosmetics from the store by not having to pay for it. I think that's totally cool. But on the other end, like you can run into a situation where it absolutely destroys the economy. Like WoW's economy is dead. Like there's nothing to WoW's economy anymore. If you have the money for it, if you work a 9 to 5, you come home, buy a WoW token, buy yourself a piece of gear, you're good. I mean, yeah, it's not going to be the best piece, but you don't need the best piece because catch-up system's coming in a couple of months. So
that's the bigger issue. It's not that money's overpowered. It's not that there's pay to win. It's that the catch-up systems come at such a regular interval that I'm like, well, I only need to be caught up when I'm going to play. So there's a 4-day weekend coming up. I'm going to play a lot. I'll go ahead and buy a round of gear. Oh, I'm probably not going to play much in the next month. I'll just stick around with my current gear because the world isn't dangerous anyway. It's not like we're moving through different levels of hell or torment or whatever, where like, oh my gosh, if I'm not on torment 11, I'm not getting current gear. So like I can run around like in WoW, I'm in like 380s right now. And I just run around in 380s because 380s, like I can pull everything. I can pull 10 mobs for a quest. So I don't need to up it. And honestly, what I'm doing in WoW right now is I'm doing transmog runs. I'm doing old content. I'm getting my all the things percentage up because BFA doesn't interest me. It doesn't.
There's no reason to be interested in that regard because none of the content rewards you with satisfactory pieces of gear or anything like that.
What's the solution?
Double back on WoW token. What's the solution?
Good. Yeah.
I'll double back on WoW token and then I can so for the WoW token, like you said, the issue is predominantly like how the game is styled, and I believe in Final Fantasy it wouldn't be as economy great game breaking as it is in WoW. Because in WoW, like you said, it's because we get so much catch up so frequently. The gear invalidates itself, so God just becomes this big thing that people splurge on, and it doesn't really matter anymore. In Final Fantasy, I'm not the most up to date with the economy, but the economy seems like really rigid, really specific, and there's a ton of stuff for people to make gil and spend gil on. So maybe adding that little interest to say, okay, if you've made some gil, exchange it for Krista, that's fine. The reverse, maybe they could limit because the economy is so important in this game. So maybe you could turn Jill into Krista, but not Krista into Jill. Gil, sorry, that would be really cool.
No, I was like, if that's how it's been pronounced this whole time, like everybody, I get so much crap because I can't speak. My English is very poor.
I mean, people worry about it being able to buy houses and stuff, but that's because people think that money is what it takes to buy a house. I have the money to buy a house. There's not a house available.
If you want a house, you need a bot.
The biggest restrictor is not, the biggest restrictor not money. There's plenty of people with the money for a house. And you see it because when a house becomes available, there's 600 people standing there trying to spam it to the point that they're ready to break terms of service and build install a bot that will sit there and spam it because they can't spend it. Like they all have the money for the house, and it doesn't become a bidding war or anything like that. It's literally whoever clicks at the right time. That's what determines a house.
Yeah, and all it is I like how I did it because you're not infusing the economy with gold. say you're transferring it from a player who's already gone out and earned it. It's not like they're like, oh, here's just gold for you to go in and consume. Same thing with Jill. The
In stream, everyone started joking about it, and it just became.
I like it. I like it. That's a fun meme. It's a fun
Forever.
meme, and we just need Jack now, and then we can have. We can,
How do you pronounce the city in Heaven's Word? Starts with an I. How do you say that?
Ishgard?
Yeah,
No,
that's how I say it.
the other one that we're in.
Idleshire?
Idleshire. Idleshire.
Idle.
Idly.
That's what
It's-
I've heard it said a lot of different ways, so I didn't want to put my pronunciation out there. But Idleshire is how I say it.
Daily Quest chill hub where people would relax, so people would idle there. So I just called it Idleshire because of that, apparently.
Okay.
Oh man, that's awesome.
So
Go ahead.
kind of
Chris.
just like wrapping up a little bit here. Shadowbringers right around the corner. You switch now, so like you obviously knew that you were switching for this expansion. What is it this expansion has to give you to make you want to stick around for 6.0, 7.0 and on? And then like what is it that you're like, some part of you has to be afraid that like it's going to drop and you're like, this isn't what I signed up for. So is there anything that you really are like, man, I hope this is what I expect?
So this might seem like a cop-out answer. More of what I've just experienced, because I'm so new to Final Fantasy at the moment that all of the stuff that I like about the game is all fresh to me. It's all new. All the stuff that you guys have experienced year after year after year, maybe like the way patches work and stuff like that. To me, this is amazing. I went through all the patch quests, and the amount of content that you guys get in like each patch is insane in comparison to WoW.
Yeah, that's what
so
Chris
more-
said when he first came over. He's like, "Are you kidding me?" Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, more of that, absolutely fantastic. And then one thing I hope doesn't happen. This will be a game breaker for me if this happens, right? If they actively devolve classes a similar way that they devolved Legion to BFA, I will be incredibly like frustrated, because that's the predominant reason why I can't enjoy Battle for Azeroth.
Right.
It's because of the devolving of the classes and the reducing in player power. I would like to see abilities added, and then maybe like consolidate a few things, but I don't want to lose more than I gain, if that makes sense. That would be a huge game breaker to me, and then obviously another big game breaker to me would absolutely be if the raiding ends up becoming not one of the more important ways of getting gear. Like, that's also happened in WoW now with Mythic Plus. Raiding to me in an MMORPG is the pinnacle of like the content that you're supposed to be doing if you want to get gear. So as long as that remains the same, I will also be happy. If they change that, then that would be another hard hit for me, because that's what they changed in WoW too.
What does WoW do in 9.0? I mean, because it's essentially BFA. Like, an expansion is always that really good restarting point. Like, it's a good opportunity to say, hey, we've heard you, we've listened. What does WoW have to do for like in 9.0? Can it like is you know, like, obviously, let's say 14 they don't make any mistakes. Like, everything is like, we're happy. WoW refugees are happy. What is WoW like? How do they even like? Do you think they could even care to bring it, or is there any path forward for them?
I've had this discussion so often. I think if they really truly want, it's different audiences now.
Right.
Modern WoW is a different development philosophy entirely.
Right. Classics coming out, you know. So go ahead.
If they really wanted to bring like my raider mentality back to the game, it would probably take them a couple of expansions, not just one, to revert a lot of the changes that we didn't like. I honestly believe it would take them at least 2 expansions to revert it back, and then even then there would still need to be like stuff they have to tweak, because you can't just remove stuff. It's easier to add than it is to remove, right? So that would be the most frustrating part. It's just a case of the core development philosophy of them themselves has changed, and you can see that when you look at the classic team and the modern team and how they think about stuff. It's very, very clear that they're not intending to create the same experience that they previously had in other expansions. So going forward, I really don't believe that there's much of an incentive. If you're like me and maybe you've moved over to a different MMO and you're really enjoying it, I honestly do not believe there's like another incentive that's going to bring you back if they carry on the same way they are. They would have to completely restructure the way they think about developing the game. And it would take multiple expansions, like I said.
Okay. Scott, do you have any final thoughts just that you want to share? Like the floor is yours, as well as where can people find you? What do you have coming up that people can get excited about?
Okay, so all I want to say is like predominantly, this is going to be like the most cliche thing in the world. Like great community, by the way, but it's been so welcoming. Like
So proud of
everybody
this
is,
community.
like, yeah, saying hello, like explaining the game to me, jumping into the Discords, talking to me. You guys are giving me a platform to actually talk and sort of interact with the community is really really cool. But you can find me on twitter.com/ZoneOfScott. And also on twitch.tv/ScottZone and YouTube for the same thing. And then just final words. If you want to come to my channel and check me out, just know that I will probably be smashing my head into some form of minimum item level content. And I might not see your message because I'm too frustrated at the fact that I've died to dive bombs 6 times in a row. That's probably what you'll end up experiencing for the most part. So yeah, that's all I really say there.
So be sure to just spam him with constant at signs. Scott. Chris, so what do you got coming up? And what any final thoughts for you?
So Brian and I are about to go on the media tour. So I don't know like what all we're about to say about that. Basically, we're gonna go see what they want to show us about Shadowbringers. That will lock us behind an embargo. So whatever we see there, we'll have to keep quiet until whatever date they say. You'll see us and all the other creators that got invited this time around. You'll see probably all our videos go live on the same day because that's how the rule works. Live letters coming up. It's the 24th, but that's Japanese time. So I believe that's the 23rd. Is that how time works?
Something like that.
For those of us in North America. So that'll be coming up and I'm really excited about that. Other than that, I'm actually kind of winding down my Stormblood experience, making sure I don't burn myself out. It's easy to let the hype feel like energy, but it's not. It's more like caffeine. Like you gotta rest. So I do want to finish up Minor and get it so that I have all my gatherers at cap. And then I'm probably going to maybe play one night a week between now and the expansion and focus on other games and, finishing up house projects and stuff so that in July when my wife's like, hey, can you help me with this? I'm like, no. So let me get all that stuff done so that I can focus all my free time on Shadowbringers when it gets here.
As for me, I think later today I've got my job rankings video that's going out. I'm sure that's going to be a very educational and interesting discussion. I know there will be people who will be disappointed, but there are, I think, people who will be thrilled. Just like with any kind of like opinion piece, having played all the jobs, I think they all have like some strengths, and I'm really it's going to be fun to see how that translates into Shadowbringers. The other thing I think we've got. We were just trying to help, set the expectations, help people get into the game, kind of teach them the things that they need to know. So hopefully, like my goal is like if somebody comes over and I'm able to kind of help them, and then they can go and find another creator who focuses in on like that savage content, and because it's like let me help get you into the game. I think it's truly a phenomenal game, and I'm really hopeful that the experience within the next expansion continues to build upon, I think, the quality and the content, and as well as continue to add to the community. It's been a really, fun thing to kind of see over this spring, just the acceleration that, that Final Fantasy has gone under. And then obviously, at just like pure, like migrations in numbers for you see so many new players, which is really thrilling to see. But you can find us on Work to Game on Twitter, Work to Game on Twitch. We have you can spell it any which way, and Google should point you hopefully to the right direction. Guys, for Work to Game, thanks so much for tuning in live to this podcast. You're watching later on YouTube on the archive, or you can catch it on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or on SoundCloud. Links are in the description. We'll also include links so that you can go check out Scott's content. Be sure to leave him a comment. He is a very entertaining, also very well-informed individual. You can't I highly encourage you to check out his stream. It's been very fun for us to be hanging out, enjoying it. And then thank you, Scott, so much for coming on the podcast here. We're going to have to absolutely get you back at some point, like after... kind of see like now once the information's out, once like maybe we all have hands-on with Shadowbringers, we bring you back and be like, okay, how is it? Because I think I love your perspective. I love your insight. The way you also think of things is really interesting. So praise. I sincerely...
It's my life. This is amazing.
Yeah. So without further ado, I guess we're going to go wrap the show. For Work to Game, my name is Brian.
My name is Chris.
My name's Scott.
Yeah.
There it is.
There it
Never
is.
warned them.
Yeah. Well, I never do. And then it's like you could see like, oh, somebody's been on the podcast before. They're ready to rock and roll. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Hey, it's me. It's been a while since I talked to you guys directly this way, but don't tell anybody. We've got even more epic content planned for this channel. The response has been incredible. We hope to see you. If you're new, hit subscribe, leave us a comment. I'd like to talk to you more about video games. I can't seem to speak the language. All right.